The words that ended my old life were delivered over meatloaf on a Tuesday. "Mom, we need to talk about the situation," my daughter Jessica began, not meeting my eyes. Her husband, Kevin, shoveled potatoes into his mouth like this was any other dinner. With the twins starting college next year and the market being what it is, well, you're an extra mouth we just can't afford to feed anymore. I actually laughed. I thought it was one of her dark jokes. "Very funny, Jess. That's the peas." She didn't laugh. Kevin didn't look up. The air in their expensive, open-concept kitchen went cold. "I'm serious," she said, her voice flat. "We need the basement apartment for a paying tenant. You have 30 days to find somewhere else." The fork froze halfway to my mouth. An extra mouth. I'd sold my own house to give them the down payment for this place. I watched their kids for free for 15 years so Jessica could climb the corporate ladder. I'd spent the last 6 months cooking their meals, cleaning their mess, and using my Social Security check to buy the damn groceries. I was now being called an extra mouth for eating. I looked at my only daughter, at the sleek blonde bob and the diamond tennis bracelet she'd gotten for her last birthday, a gift I'd contributed to. "You're kicking me out?" "Don't be dramatic, Mom. We're repurposing the space. It's a financial decision." "A financial decision. Right." I placed my napkin on the table, my hands steady despite the earthquake happening inside my chest. "I see." I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just stood up, walked down to the basement apartment that had been my home for a decade, and closed the door. I sat on the edge of my bed, in the room filled with photo albums of Christmases and birthdays and family vacations I'd paid for, and I felt something inside me turn to stone. They thought I was a frail, retired bookkeeper, a 68-year-old woman with no power. What they'd forgotten, what I'd let them forget, was that before I was a mother and a grandmother, I was Margaret Maggie Finnegan, the most ruthless commercial real estate broker in 3 states. The next morning, I put on the one power suit I still owned and took an Uber downtown. I walked into the offices of Sterling Properties, a firm I'd built from the ground up before selling it to my partner, Arthur, for a king's ransom. His secretary tried to stop me. "Mr. Sterling is in a meeting?" I walked right past her and threw open his office door. Arthur looked up annoyed, then did a double take. "Maggie, my God!" "I need a favor, Artie. And before you say no, remember who taught you everything you know." An hour later, I was sipping coffee while Arthur pulled up property records. "Their building? The one on Elmwood? It's owned by a faceless LLC out of Delaware. They've been letting maintenance slide. The tenants are organizing to sue over the black mold." A slow, cold smile spread across my face. "Get me the parent company. And Artie, I want you to make an offer. A lowball offer. Use one of the shell corporations from the Bermuda portfolio." He leaned back, a matching grin on his face. "You're going to war." "No," I corrected him, my voice quiet. "They started the war. I'm just going to win it." While Jessica and Kevin were at work, thinking I was packing my pathetic little boxes, I was on the phone with a hedge fund manager in Zurich. By the end of the week, through a series of untraceable holding companies, I was the proud new owner of 1247 Elmwood Avenue. Their home, their landlord. The eviction notice came on thick, creamy legal paper. Jessica brought it downstairs, her face a mask of fake sympathy. "Oh, Mom, I'm so sorry. Your new landlord is evicting everyone for renovations. What terrible timing. Maybe you can find a nice senior living facility." I took the paper, my expression neutral. "Thank you, dear." I waited until moving day. A bright Saturday morning. The kids were helping me load a few sad boxes into a rented truck I had no intention of driving anywhere. Jessica and Kevin stood on the porch, already discussing which wall to knock down to expand their living room. That's when I walked up, not toward the truck, but toward them. I held up a brand new set of keys. "I guess this is goodbye," Jessica said, trying to sound sad. "It is," I agreed. Then I turned and inserted the key into the front door of the building next to theirs, a nearly identical brownstone I'd also quietly purchased. Jessica's face faltered. "Mom, what are you doing?" I opened the door to reveal a stunning, fully renovated interior. "Moving into my new home. It's smaller, but the view of your place is priceless." Kevin's face was a thundercloud. "How the hell did you afford this?" I ignored him, looking only at my daughter. "Oh, and one more thing." I pulled an official-looking document from my purse. "As your new landlord, I'm serving you with this. Your rent is being tripled. effective immediately. The color drained from Jessica's face. You what? You said I was an extra mouth you couldn't afford to feed anymore. Turns out I'm the one holding the grocery store. Pay up or get out. Your choice. I turned and walked into my beautiful new home, closing the door on their stunned silence. The game was on, and Grandma was taking no prisoners. The sound of my front door closing, separating me from my daughter's stunned silence, was the most satisfying sound I'd heard in a decade. I leaned against the polished wood, my heart pounding, not from fear, but from pure, unadulterated triumph. Through the peephole, I watched the scene unfold like my own personal reality show. Jessica stood frozen on the porch, the eviction notice fluttering from her limp hand. Kevin's face had turned a spectacular shade of purple, his mouth opening and closing like a stranded fish. "She can't do this!" he finally roared, his voice muffled through the door. "This is illegal!" Jessica just stared at my door, her expression a perfect blend of horror and disbelief. "She bought the building," she whispered, the reality finally sinking in. "Mom bought our building." I smiled, turning away from the peephole. Let them marinate in their panic. I had a war to plan. My new home was a testament to quiet wealth and brutal efficiency. While I'd been playing the doting, slightly feeble grandmother, I'd been overseeing every detail of this renovation. Hardwood floors, a state-of-the-art kitchen, and a top-floor office with a panoramic view that directly looked into Jessica and Kevin's living room. Poetic justice, served with a side of premium Italian marble. The first shot across their bow was a formal legal notice delivered by a process server the very next morning. I watched from my window as a man in a suit handed Kevin the thick envelope. He tore it open, his eyes scanning the document. I didn't need to hear him to know what it said. It was the new lease agreement outlining the tripled rent due in full on the 1st of the month. The following pages were a meticulous list of building violations they were now responsible for fixing, from the faulty front step to the defective wiring in their unit. All fabricated, all perfectly plausible, and all legally their problem as tenants. My phone started buzzing an hour later. Jessica. I let it go to voicemail. "Mom, pick up. This isn't funny. We need to talk about this power trip you're on. You can't just triple our rent." The second call came from Kevin. "Margaret, this is absurd. We're taking this to the housing board. You'll hear from our lawyer." I deleted both messages. They were still operating under the delusion that I was the woman they'd kicked out. They hadn't met Maggie Finnegan. Their lawyer, a young guy named David with a cheap suit and a loud tie, called me that afternoon. "Miss Finnegan, my clients are prepared to file a harassment suit. Tripling the rent is unconscionable." "Is it?" I replied, my voice cool. "The market rate for a renovated 3-bedroom in this neighborhood is actually 4 times what they were paying. I'm giving them a family discount. And as for the violations, their unit has been neglected for years. The safety of my building is my primary concern. The repairs are non-negotiable." I could hear the rustle of papers on his end. He was over his head and he knew it. "My clients insist." "Your clients can insist all they want. The rent is due on the 1st. If it's not in my account by 5 p.m., I will file for eviction. Have a good day, David." I hung up. They were scrambling. Good. The next phase was more subtle, more personal. I knew their finances. I knew Jessica's pride was tied to her luxury SUV and Kevin's to his membership at the country club. I knew their twins, my grandkids, were applying to Ivy League schools with tuition that could choke a billionaire. I started small. I called in a few old favors. A week later, Jessica called me, her voice shaking with rage. "Did you have something to do with this?" she shrieked. "My American Express card was just canceled. They said a routine review of spending. I've had that card for 15 years. "How strange," I said, sipping my tea as I watched her pace in her kitchen. "Maybe you should look at your debt-to-income ratio, honey. It's a killer." The following week, Kevin's company announced restructuring. He wasn't laid off, but his year-end bonus, the one they were counting on to pay the first of my new rent payments, was deferred indefinitely. The pressure was mounting. I saw the delivery trucks stop coming. The fancy organic grocery deliveries were replaced by Kevin coming home with generic brand bags from the discount store. The tension in their house was a physical thing, visible even from my window. Then, one evening, my doorbell rang. It was Jessica. Alone. She looked exhausted,
The perfect facade finally cracked. "Mom," she said, her voice soft, pleading, "can I come in, please? We need to talk." I opened the door and let her step into my world. Her eyes widened as she took in the elegant furniture, the art on the walls, the sheer opulence of it all. How long have you had this?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "Long enough," I said, gesturing for her to sit. "What do you want, Jessica?" She sank into the plush sofa, looking small and lost. "We can't pay the rent, Mom. It's impossible. You've frozen our credit, you've gotten Kevin's bonus canceled. We're drowning." I said nothing. I just waited. Tears started to stream down her face. Real ones this time. "I'm sorry, okay? I'm so sorry for what I said. I was stressed. I was scared about money. Calling you an extra mouth, it was the worst thing I've ever said. Please, you're my mother. Forgive me." I looked at my daughter, truly looked at her. I saw the little girl who used to crawl into my bed during thunderstorms. I saw the teenager I comforted after her first heartbreak. And I saw the woman who looked me in the eye and threw me away. I stood up and walked to my desk, pulling out a single sheet of paper. I handed it to her. It was a new lease agreement. The rent was back to its original amount. Her face lit up with desperate, hopeful relief. "Oh, Mom, thank you. I knew you'd—" "There's a condition," I said, my voice cutting through her gratitude like a knife. She looked up, wary. "What condition?" I pointed to the clause at the bottom of the page. "You and Kevin sign over full, legal, and financial guardianship of the twins to me, effective immediately." The hope in her eyes died, replaced by pure horror. You want me to sign away my children?" I said, my gaze unwavering. "You are willing to throw away your mother. It seems we both have a price. The question is, what's yours? Your comfort or your kids?" The paper trembled in her hands. I had backed her into a corner she never knew existed. The real game was just beginning.
The silence in my living room was so thick you could taste it. Jessica stared at the lease agreement in her hands, her face a battlefield of emotions, disbelief, horror, and a dawning, chilling understanding of exactly who she was dealing with. The paper rattled like a leaf in her trembling hands. "You can't be serious," she whispered, her voice cracking. "You want me to sign over my children, my own children?" "I'm their grandmother," I said calmly, taking a slow sip of my Earl Grey tea. The china cup felt solid and reassuring in my hand. "I'm offering them stability, something you and Kevin seem to be struggling to provide. Ivy League tuition isn't cheap, Jessica, and neither is this new rent. It's a simple choice, really. Their future or your pride." She looked from the document to my face, searching for any sign of the soft-hearted pushover she'd evicted. She found only cool, unblinking calculation. "This is monstrous." "No, honey," I corrected her gently. "What you did was monstrous. This is just business." She shot up from the sofa as if electrocuted, throwing the lease agreement onto the coffee table. I will never sign this. We'll fight you. We'll go to the media. I'll tell them how you're trying to steal my children." I gave her a small, pitying smile. "And what will you tell them exactly? That your wealthy mother, whom you kicked out for being a financial burden, bought your building and is now holding you to a legal contract? That you want public sympathy after you called your own mother an extra mouth to feed? Oh, I'm sure the headlines will be very sympathetic." I leaned forward, my eyes locking with hers. "Go ahead. Make my day." The fight drained out of her. She crumpled back onto the sofa, defeated. She knew I was right. In the court of public opinion, she was the villain. "You have until the end of the week to decide. The original tripled rent is still due on the 1st, unless this signed document is in my hands." She left my house looking broken, a ghost of the confident woman who had evicted me over meatloaf. I didn't feel a twinge of guilt. She had drawn the line between mother and daughter when she served me that eviction notice.
I was just respecting her boundaries. The next 48 hours were a masterclass in psychological warfare. I didn't need to do a thing. The pressure cooker of their own making was doing all the work for me. From my window, I watched their life unravel in real time. Kevin came home with a cardboard box from his office. He'd been let go. The repo man showed up for Jessica's Lexus. I saw her through the window, sobbing on the front steps as it was driven away. They were drowning, and I was the only one with a life preserver attached to chains they never dreamed I'd ask them to wear. The night before the rent was due, my doorbell rang again. This time, it was both of them. Kevin looked like he'd aged a decade, his shoulders slumped. Jessica's eyes were red and swollen. "We'll sign it," he said, his voice hollow. He wouldn't meet my gaze. I ushered them into my study, the lease agreement waiting on the desk next to a fancy pen. Jessica's hand shook so badly she could barely hold it. As she scrawled her signature, a tear fell onto the paper, smudging the ink slightly. Kevin signed with the grim finality of a man signing his own death warrant. I picked up the document, blew on the signatures, and smiled. "Lovely. I'll have my lawyer file this in the morning." I then slid a different piece of paper toward them. "And here is your new lease, with the original rent reinstated. See? I'm a woman of my word." They took it without a word and shuffled out, two broken people who had just sold their parental sovereignty for a manageable rent payment. The following week, I began my new role as de facto guardian with vigor. I scheduled a meeting with the twins, Chloe and Jake, at a chic downtown cafe. They slouched into the booth, all teenage angst and nervous energy. "Your parents have granted me oversight of your college funds and future planning," I explained smoothly, pushing 2 caramel macchiatos toward them. Chloe, the more outspoken of the two, frowned. "Mom and Dad said you were making things difficult." "I'm making things secure. Starting with your college choices, you'll be applying to state schools. The Ivy League dream is over." Jake's head shot up. "What?" "But Mom said—" "Your mother," I interrupted, my voice sharp enough for them both to flinch, "is no longer in a position to make those promises. The trust funds I set up for you have been reallocated. State school or no school? Your choice." I watched the disappointment and confusion war on their faces. They were just beginning to understand that the generous grandma who gave them gifts was gone, replaced by a hard-eyed CEO they didn't recognize. Later that night, my phone buzzed. It was Jessica. "How could you?" she hissed, her voice raw with a fresh wave of pain. "You told them state school? You're crushing their dreams." "I'm teaching them financial reality, something you clearly never learned. Besides, you signed the papers, Jessica. You gave me the authority. Or did you think there would be no consequences?" There was a long silence on the other end, broken only by a choked sob before the line went dead. I ended the call and looked around my beautiful, silent home. I had won. I had my revenge, my property, and now control over the family legacy. I had everything I thought I wanted. So why did the victory feel so hollow? The silence that answered was deafening. The war was over, but I was the only one left standing on a battlefield of my own creation, surrounded by the ruins of the very family I had sought to protect. And for the first time, I wondered if the price of winning had been my own soul. The hollow feeling that followed my victory was a ghost that haunted my beautiful new home. I'd stare out my window at their dark apartment, waiting for something, a sense of completion that never came. I had their signatures. I had their obedience. But the taste of triumph had turned to ash in my mouth. The breaking point came on a rainy Thursday. I saw Chloe, my 17-year-old granddaughter, sitting on their front steps in the downpour, not even trying to shelter herself. Her shoulders were shaking with sobs. Something primal, something deeper than revenge twisted in my gut. I grabbed an umbrella and walked across the street. "Chloe? Honey, what's wrong?" She looked up, her face a mess of tears and rain. "They're fighting all the time, Grandma. It's all they do. About money, about you. Mom says Dad's a failure. Dad says Mom's the reason you hate us." She wiped her nose on her sleeve, a gesture so young and vulnerable it shattered the last of my icy resolve. "They said they might get a divorce. Is this because of me? Because of college?" Her words were a punch to the heart. I saw myself in her, the child caught in the crossfire of adult wars. I had been so focused on punishing Jessica that I'd become the monster terrorizing my own grandchild. "No, baby," I said, my voice thick. I sat beside her on the wet step, not caring about my designer slacks. "This is not your fault. None of this is your fault." That night, I didn't sleep. I paced my pristine floors, surrounded by the spoils of a war I no longer wanted to win. I thought about Tom, my late husband. What would he think of me? The woman he loved, who used to cry at sappy commercials, had become this ruthless tyrant who made her own grandchild cry in the rain. The next morning, I did something I hadn't done in years. I went to the cemetery. Standing over Tom's grave, the wind whipping through my coat, I finally let myself cry. I messed up, Tom. I got so lost in being right that I forgot how to be her mother. A sense of clarity, cold and clear, washed over me. This wasn't about winning anymore. It was about stopping the bleeding before the patient died on the table. I went straight to their apartment and knocked. Jessica opened the door, her eyes guarded and hostile. "What do you want now? Here to repossess the furniture?" "Can I come in?" I asked, my voice quiet. She was so surprised she just stepped aside. The apartment was a mess. Boxes were half-packed, a visible testament to their planned, desperate flight. Kevin sat at the kitchen table, head in his hands. The twins were nowhere to be seen, probably hiding in their rooms from the tension. I took a deep breath and calling a truce. Kevin barked a bitter laugh. "A truce? After you've already burned everything to the ground?" "I was hurt," I said, looking directly at Jessica. "What you said to me, an extra mouth, it broke me, Jess. It made me into someone I don't recognize. And I'm sorry for the person I became." Jessica stared at me, her arms crossed, but I saw the wall waver, just for a second. "I'm tearing up the guardianship papers," I continued, pulling the document from my purse. "I didn't just show it to them. I ripped it in half, then into quarters, letting the pieces flutter to the floor. The twins can go to whatever college they get into. I'll pay for it. All of it." The silence in the room was absolute. Kevin's mouth hung open. "And the rent," I said, my gaze sweeping over the home they'd built. "It goes back to what it was. Permanently. This is your home. It always should have been." Jessica's tough facade finally crumbled. A single tear escaped, tracing a path down her cheek. She choked out, "Why? After everything we did, why would you do that?" "Because I looked at my granddaughter crying in the rain, and I realized I was fighting a war against the wrong enemy. The enemy wasn't you. It was the anger, the pride, the hurt, and I'm done letting it win." I turned to leave, the weight on my shoulders finally, blessedly lifting. "Mom? Wait." I stopped. Jessica's voice was small. "I'm sorry," she whispered, the words rushing out. "I was scared and stressed, and I took it out on you. It was the cruelest and most ungrateful thing I've ever done. You've never been an extra anything. "You're my mom." It wasn't a dramatic reconciliation. There were no hugs, no sweeping musical score. There was just a quiet, tear-filled acknowledgement of the damage done on both sides and a fragile, tentative hope that maybe, just maybe, it could be repaired. I walked back to my house, the spring air feeling cleaner than it had in months. The victory I'd been chasing was an illusion. This fragile peace, this chance to rebuild, this was the real prize. The war was finally over, and for the first time, we were all on the same side, the side of family.
The silence in my house felt different now. It wasn't the cold, empty silence of victory, but a quiet, waiting space. The pieces of the guardianship paper still sat in my trash can, a stark white reminder of the line I'd almost crossed. I'd spent weeks being a hurricane, and now I was left in the eerie calm, surveying the damage. The first change was small. A note slipped under my door from Jessica. "The twins have a soccer game on Saturday, if you're free." It wasn't an apology. We'd already done that. It was a thread, tentatively offered. I went. I sat on the bleachers, a respectful distance away from them. When Chloe scored a goal, our eyes met across the field. She gave me a small, hesitant wave. I waved back, and something tight in my chest finally loosened. A week later, my doorbell rang. It was Kevin, holding a toolbox. "The faucet in Jessica's bathroom is leaking," he said, not meeting my eyes. "Figured I'd fix it, since I'm the handyman around here again." It was his version of an olive branch. I let him in. We didn't talk much, but the hostile energy was gone, replaced by a gruff, awkward truce. He fixed the faucet. I made him a sandwich. It was the most normal interaction we'd had in months. The real turning point came on a Tuesday evening. Jessica showed up at my door, her face pale. "It's Mom," she said, her voice trembling. "The nursing home called. She's taken a bad turn." My mother, her grandmother, the matriarch who had seen all of this unfold from her room in the assisted living facility I paid for, the one person whose opinion still truly mattered to me. We drove to the home together, the silence in the car heavy but not hostile. We found Grandma Eleanor frail in her bed, but her eyes were sharp as ever. She looked from Jessica to me, and a knowing smile touched her lips. "So," she said, her voice a dry whisper, "the two titans have finally called a ceasefire." Jessica burst into tears, burying her face in the old woman's blanket. "I'm so sorry, Grandma. I messed everything up." "No, child," Grandma Eleanor said, patting her head. "You were both being fools, but even fools can find their way home if they want to." She looked at me. "Margaret, you have everything your father and I ever worked for. Was it worth almost losing this?" Her question hung in the sterile air. I looked at my daughter, sobbing at her grandmother's bedside, and I had my answer. "No, Mom, it wasn't." That night, Jessica and I sat in the nursing home cafeteria, drinking terrible coffee. We didn't rehash the fight. We didn't talk about money or buildings. We talked about Chloe's college applications. We talked about Jake's new girlfriend. We talked about Dad. For the first time in a year, we just talked. The healing wasn't instant. Trust, once shattered, doesn't magically reassemble. But we started building something new, something more honest. I dissolved the shell company that owned their building and signed the deed over to them. A real gift this time, with no strings attached. I reinstated the twins' college funds, no conditions. The day Chloe got her acceptance to Stanford, we all went out to dinner. A real family dinner. There was laughter. There was a toast. When the bill came, there was no silent power struggle over who would pay. Jessica reached for it, but I placed my hand gently over hers. "Let me," I said. "It's my pleasure."
She looked at me, and for the first time in a long time, I saw my little girl in her eyes. Not the corporate climber, not the stressed-out mother, not the woman who had kicked me out. Just my daughter. "Okay, Mom," she said softly. "Thank you." We walked out of the restaurant together into the cool night air. Jessica and Kevin walked ahead, their arms linked, the twins joking with them. I hung back for a moment, watching them. The extra mouth had a family again. The maid was finally home. I had set out to teach my daughter a lesson about respect. In the end, she taught me one about forgiveness. And I realized as I watched my family disappear into the night that the most valuable thing I owned wasn't a building or a bank account. It was the space I'd finally made in my heart to let them back in. The war was over, and peace, I discovered, was far more profitable than any revenge.